Mary nodded. That's the reason I became a nurse in the first place. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. Unfortunately, it often gets so busy here that we end up doing far less of that than our patients need. That's why volunteers like you are so important. The elevator arrived with a bang and the doors glided open. Thinking about a career in medicine, Lisa? The girl shook her head. Not really. Volunteering is one thing, she said as she stepped inside, but a career is something else. I really don't know what I want to do just yet. Well, in the meantime, you're certainly welcome here. Thanks. No, thank you, Lisa heard as the door slid closed. Out in the parking lot, she scanned the cars for her parents' green Subaru, momentarily forgetting where she had parked it. She was thinking about the things she had said to Nurse Clayton, or really the things she hadn't said. Things like why she had chosen to do her volunteer service in hospitals and senior citizens' homes rather than in community centers and daycare facilities like the rest of her classmates. She'd had a hard time She'd had a hard enough time trying to explain it to her mother and stepfather, who felt that being around all that pain and suffering, as they'd put it, was the last thing Lisa needed. You don't have to prove anything, they'd said. Well, maybe they were wrong. Maybe there was plenty she had to prove. Like there was a reason she was still living and breathing when her older sister Ellen had stopped doing both 6 months ago. Ellen, who had been student council president, top scorer on the senior girls basketball team, and the lead in two of the school's drama productions, and managed to maintain an honors average at the same time. That is, before the cancer brought everything to an end, faster than Lisa could have imagined possible. Besides, it wasn't as though Lisa had much else occupying her time anyway. Her sister had been one of those people everyone loved to be around, and it was only when Ellen got sick that Lisa discovered the people she spent time with were more Ellen's friends than hers. There were some, like Robin and Jen, who still called once in a while and even dropped by from time to time. But without Ellen there to make the moments seamless, getting together had seemed to become, for her friends anyway, more obligation than pleasure. The air had cooled somewhat since she'd arrived, but the late afternoon sun still felt warm on her neck as she crossed the parking lot and unlocked the Subaru. Although she'd been driving for more than a year, she was still grateful for the freedom she felt each time she slid behind the steering wheel. It was driving that had helped her cope with losing her sister, being able to point the vehicle in whatever direction she wanted and just go. Even now, when thoughts of Ellen began to seep into every moment, welling up like water in a footprint after a rain, she'd ask her parents for the keys to the car. It wasn't just the mechanics of driving that helped turn her mind away from the horror of that hospital room. It was never knowing exactly what lay ahead. Even driving through familiar neighborhoods gave her opportunities for surprise. The kid who rode his bike into the street without looking, the driver who didn't yield the right of way or turned without signaling. During those final days when her family had waited, even prayed for the inevitable, it was those moments of not knowing that had somehow made bearable the tragedy that was Ellen. Even going home wasn't something Lisa was certain she'd do. It always seemed to be a conscious choice she made at the end of every drive. Like the choice she'd made to volunteer at the Children's Hospital, and now here at Silver Meadows. She needed the feeling that those places gave her, that her being there made a difference. Unlike the time she sat with Ellen, who in those last few days hadn't even seemed to know there was someone holding her hand, someone sponging her forehead, someone choking back sobs in the stillness of the room. For a moment, memories of her sister washed over her. Ellen laughing on the phone, Ellen singing in the shower, Ellen lying in the burnished mahogany casket at Prule's funeral home, and Lisa had to grip the steering wheel to keep from shaking from sobbing. Her long fingernails bit into the flesh of her palms, and the pain somehow made sitting there alive and breathing less wrong. When the final wave shuddered through her, she slid the key into the ignition and started the car. Glancing at the clock on the dash, she saw she still had time for a drive before heading home.